So what what surgery or treatment or whatever can I do, or do I have to take medication or what? And she's like, "Mm, you unfortunately, it can't really be corrected. There's no surgery, no treatment, no medication available." And I remember like, phew. Like I said, I'd never known anyone was partially sighted before. So at that stage, you feel completely alone. It's like, yo, this is mad. Yeah, probably the first time I cried about it was that day, that night. I recall crying about it in my room, maybe for like 5 minutes, thinking of all the things that I probably would never do.
Ndumiso's story is a dichotomy, one that is both inspiring but scary at the same time. Scary because Ndumiso is the type of character who is exceptionally relatable, and so as you hear the story, you can't help but put yourself in his shoes, meaning you wonder what it would be like to lose your eyesight, not have an idea of what was going on in your life, and trying to figure out what to do next. Inspiring because despite all the hardship that he's had to face, he has made an immense success of himself. My name is Kieran Naidu, and you're listening to the Self-Starters Podcast, a place where we learn how to take our ideas and turn them into successful action. And because you're listening, you have no excuse not to get started on your idea right this moment. Unless you just want to finish this episode first.
Have you always had a visual impairment? Or is it something that developed later on in life?
You could actually say yes and no, but okay, let's say no primarily because growing up, I started wearing glasses when I was in like grade 3, I think it was. And so I remember even maybe it was grade 2 or 3 where like seeing the board from the back before I had glasses was a bit of a stretch. So teachers sometimes would move me closer to the front. Then, yeah, after that, then I got glasses and I pretty much would see the board from wherever in the class and that kind of stuff. And then I pretty much just always used them because I just felt more comfortable playing with them, with my friends and whatever. Yeah, so pretty much growing up all along, I could see, I guess, more or less like the average person. Okay, I guess slightly less. Then, but I mean, yeah, I even got to the point where at varsity, I got a license and stuff, so I could see well enough to even get a driver's license. Then, like maybe within a year thereafter, then I
How old were you
started.
at that stage?
I think I was what, 19, 20? Yeah,
Okay.
19. Yeah. So then around like within a year, like after that, like I just started feeling weird, or I don't even think I really was too aware of it at the time, but like it would be like I'd be writing an exam or something and I was taking really long. But then, you come out of an exam, you're like, dude, I didn't finish. Dude, I also didn't. No one finishes the exam. So you're just thinking, it was a tough exam. It took long. We all didn't finish. Right, cool. Then I'm doing this thing and I'm writing. And then there were times where I remember like specific moments where I'd be maybe you're flipping like with accounting exams, you need to refer back to the information all the time and the particular transaction before you go back and and that's the times it's like I was struggling to just skim read and quickly just get to the point. So I'd like have to like go through the whole paragraph bit by bit, read through it line by line by until I find what I'm looking for, rather than just going boom straight to it like I normally would. Or there were times where if I'd be writing, sometimes it's like I'm not even necessarily seeing what I'm writing, like the shadow that comes from my hand or the silhouette or whatever on the paper was almost sort of blocking off what I was writing at times. But this wasn't something that was consistently happening. So it also wasn't necessarily something I guess I paid that much attention to. And I've always grown up, the way I had been with the sight I had or whatever. So I So I don't know. I didn't really think too much of it. And to be honest, I wasn't even necessarily aware that there are people who are partially sighted and stuff before I became partially sighted, you know. I was literally the first person I knew who was partially sighted. So even that lack of awareness, I guess, didn't necessarily make me think of it, you know. And you hear people who are blind, you just presume totally blind, like you see nothing, you know, as opposed to legally blind, being someone who's also partially sighted and stuff. So yeah, it was only as my struggles kept continuing at varsity, like every time I was really, really struggling to finish exams, like to the point where it was now like rather than completing 100% of the exam, I'd maybe only complete like 60% of the exam,
Sure.
you know, consistently. You know, because I remember like the 1 year where it was like every exam, I'm like, yo, I only like finished like 60% of like all these exams, you know. And so if I was passing, I was passing because I basically got
You
most
knew
of the stuff
everything in
I
that
answered
60%,
right.
yeah.
Basically, yeah. Because that's how I was passing. Literally, I was getting stuff like in the lower 50s kind of stuff, you know, more for the stuff that I was passing. Then the other stuff, I was usually getting like subs, you know. So literally now, I was like, yo, okay, I don't know if I'm really just, why am I so slow kind of thing. Then I recall, like I also used to play indoor soccer. So our team was dope. Like we were dominating people.
You know,
Dude, we broke
it
a
seems like
record.
everyone who plays indoor soccer at UKZN, they have the best team consistently.
Okay,
Yeah,
listen,
that seems to be the
listen
story.
here.
We have the best team.
My team. So every Friday, always used to like put teams together and whatever, and come and play and whatever, right? My team, because so you basically you win, you stay. Losers get off our court. We had a record of winning 13 matches back to back. There was like different combinations of other teams who kept coming into challenges. You know how many hours we were out there on that court, bro? People were still coming in fresh, ready to play us.
Is this maybe the reason why you were only answering 60% of your exam? Too much time on the football court.
It was only on Fridays. Okay. We
Fair
respected the
enough. Fair enough.
education Monday to Thursday. And until Fridays at about 10. So then yeah. So yeah, even there, like I remember I could play and everything was cool. And then, you know, I used to also play with friends at other football fields that we used to play on like Tuesday nights and stuff.
Yeah.
Even there, you know, we used to play all the time. And then there came a point where it was just like, yo, okay, I'm struggling to like see the ball. But then I've always had lower eyesight than like most people I knew. But it wasn't so low that it was really hampering like my way of life. So at the same time, when I was the one who was struggling with the lighting or whatever, when we were playing at the field or struggling to maybe pick up the ball sometimes in the air, the indoor soccer thing, I guess I didn't necessarily pay too much attention to that either because I've always had low eyesight than others, you know. So yeah, okay, cool, whatever, you know. I just got used to competing like that kind of thing. So yeah, then but yeah, eventually it just got to a point where I was struggling so much at varsity. It just felt like it was lessening even more. And I was like, it's becoming ridiculously hard to really compete academically or even sports wise, whatever, with everything I'm doing at the moment. And I just don't get what's happening. So I eventually went to see an optometrist. The optometrist, like, they also said that like my eyesight seems a bit unusual and that kind of stuff. So they referred me to an ophthalmologist. So I went through to the ophthalmologist.
Just a quick question on this.
Yeah.
How many years? So you were 19 when you
Mm,
started noticing. How many years down the line was this?
okay. Let's say, okay, no, I was 19 when I got my license.
When you got your license, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, let's say 20 when those, yeah, 19 to 20 though, when like all the, the writing, the exams, smaller little things
Yeah.
started developing. Then it progressively went on. So I would say by the time I went to see the ophthalmologist, I would have been about 21, 22.
Cool. So like two
Yeah.
to 3 years almost of of your eyesight progressively getting worse. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry for the
Sure.
interruption. So yeah, you went to see the ophthalmologist.
So I went to see the ophthalmologist and they tested me for a whole variety of eye conditions and did different sorts of eye tests and blah blah blah. And the homie's conclusion was, I'm not sure what it is. Come back in about 2 years. Let's see how it progresses. I
Oh
think
my
we'll be able
goodness.
to get more information. So it's like, okay, cool. I can come back in 2 years, but in the interim, what do I do? You know? So eventually I dropped out of varsity at the time because, yeah, and it was the most difficult thing ever to explain. Like, why I'm just like, I rather just try work or something, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, because obviously your parents, they want you to achieve whatever academically and all of that. And they knew how capable I was, I knew how capable I was. It wasn't
Yeah.
easy for me to make that decision, but it was just like, I don't know what's going on. Like, everything I'm doing, I'm always taking way, way, way too long to finish any test, any exam. The same thing keeps happening, Sometimes the times it's like even just ruling on the line or whatever, I couldn't even get that straight sometimes. And it was just getting frustrating. But there's obviously no conclusive evidence or whatever diagnosis that had come through. So I don't really have anything to back up whatever I'm saying with as such.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just an extremely confusing time for me for years because different types of jobs that I got here and there, I always ended up having struggles visually, whether it was struggles to see the computer and the IT guy department, people have to come through and really try adjust the screen or whatever. But maybe that particular software, it won't work the same way when it's been
Yeah.
zoomed in to that extent and all of that. So somewhere along the line, I kept having those kind of issues at different kinds of things that I tried. So every time it just ended up being a frustration. And yeah, this kind of job or that thing all did end up working out for those kinds of different reasons. And then, yeah, so then I like sat around at home kind of thing.
And just a question on that. So, you mentioned that, or yeah, 2 to 3 years to speak to the ophthalmologist.
Yeah.
Why that long? Was there a part of you that was almost, especially when academically you were answering less and less? Were you blaming yourself? Was it a case of my eyes are?
Yeah.
I know you're told when you go to the optometrist that your eyes change and you wait for it to
Mm,
settle and then it'll settle a bit further. Was it a bit of that? Um,
yeah.
was there
Yeah.
almost a case of you were worried that your eyes were actually deteriorating rapidly, but is there a stigma attached to talking about it? What was the reason for such a long period before you went to the doctor?
One, I would say, okay, yeah, I was seeing optometrists fairly regularly, like
Hmm.
annually, but no optometrist had ever referred me to an ophthalmologist until I was like 22,
Okay.
you know, and I didn't know that an ophthalmologist exists. Funny as that it would sound, I guess, considering I always wore glasses since I was a kid. But yeah, so I only knew of optometrists.
Yeah.
So if you keep going to them every year, and they're just like, oh, okay, okay, your prescriptions changed slightly, but they didn't seem to make much of it as well at the time. So yeah, and like I said, I don't know. Yeah, it's just one of those weird things. The way I guess you presume, maybe it is me. Because
Mm.
I think I did genuinely blame myself quite a bit. That, yeah, what the hell's going on with me? Like this is weird. because I know the stuff, you know, like people would come to me and ask me for help, you know, with the study material or whatever, blah, 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 blah. I'd explaining everything to them like awesomely. And the same person who I've just been helping, giving them all the tips on how to answer this and this, they're like killing it. And then I'm busy like scraping it, like just making it, you know, and I was like, it was frustrating the hell out of me, you know. But yeah, so in the end, the January 2015, I ended up going to another ophthalmologist.
And how long was this since the first ophthalmologist?
Like 2 years or so, just over.
So
2
you
years,
actually did wait the 2 years to go back to an ophthalmologist.
Yeah, the thing is, everyone was when they referred that person, they were like, "Oh, he's like the best dude around," or whatever, blah 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 blah. I mean, even the ophthalmologist, the second one I ended up going to, she even said, "Oh, that guy is pretty good too." Yeah.
And talk to me about that, because just hearing it blows my mind. Like, I feel frustrated on your behalf. I mean, life doesn't just stop as you wait for 2 years. And you've mentioned, you know, you tried to get jobs in between. You had to drop out of university.
Sure.
You know, and I'm sure obviously the doctor knows more than I do, but it feels almost careless to almost just say, come back in 2 years and you must just carry on with your life. There's no answers to that.
Honestly, when I look back on it now, I also do feel like it was extremely neglectful or messed up for the doctor to just be like, okay, cool. Yeah, just come back in 2 years. Let's see how it develops and whatever. Because, yeah, it was genuinely the most confusing, worst time of my life, almost. Because as frustrating, or rather as devastating as it was, when I eventually learned about my condition and whatever, at least I knew what I was dealing with, you know, as opposed to not knowing, but I'm still dealing with it. I can't explain it to anyone. You know, people see me sometimes walking and I'm bumping into people or whatever, or tripping over something randomly here and there. I literally cannot explain it. So, if anything, I just look like a weirdo, or I look stupid, or I look drunk, or I look whatever, you know. Then there was literally nothing that I could really say about it, you know, that would make sense to anyone. So yeah, then so eventually I got diagnosed with a condition called RP dystrophy.
And was that 2 years after the first ophthalmologist?
Yeah.
Sorry, just repeat the condition again. What was it? What's it
RP
called?
dystrophy.
Okay.
Retinitis pigmentosa.
And what exactly is that?
So it's a rare eye condition that is genetic, but apparently like it skips generations. It's it can go through your grandkids or whatever, great grandchildren or whatever, you know. Then it's one of the weirdest conditions, I would say. But yeah, it's got very many things attached to it. So, like for example, in terms of adjusting from light to dark or dark to light, my eyes take a lot longer than the average person's eyes are supposed to, you know. So if I've just come from a dark room and I'm entering a light place or stepping outdoors or something, like for the first two, I guess it varies, but for the first 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds, it's like there's almost just like a white canvas or a fog of some sort kind of thing in the way, you know. So it can be like that the other way around as well, vice versa, in terms of when I'm moving from being in a sunny or a very bright light, moving towards a darker one, I'm much more likely to then maybe trip over something or whatever. And it's not even like, I'm not even talking like dark as in it has to be like really dark. just literally from really bright light, like LED light, to just, your average run-of-the-mill light bulb kind of light. It's a lot softer. It feels a lot darker to me. It's more exaggerated with my condition, so it can feel darker than it would seem to, someone with the average person's eyesight, basically. So, then in terms of movement, that's another big thing. Tracking movement is very hard for me. So, like, I might be able to see something if it's at a whatever distance, maybe, but if it's moving, it's a lot harder for me to focus on it and see it. Partially because of the level of my condition of my RP dystrophy, it also creates like a tunnel vision sort of thing. So if you can imagine, if I'm looking at you through this gap, the minute you move that way, you no longer appear within this gap, the tunnel that my eyes are looking through. So I would literally have to then track and, move the central part of my eye or whatever, or my head, try find that whatever thing that I'm looking at. So as you can imagine, makes it extremely hard for me playing cricket. Yeah, it's like the worst condition to have when you're playing blind cricket. So yeah, for me it's like that. So that's another reason why sometimes I might end up stumbling over stuff or whatever, because if I'm walking, I'm now moving, right? So there's a constant movement or whatever, if I'm every step I'm taking, it's sort of like you're bouncing up and down kind of thing. So it makes it that much more challenging. Or literally I turn around the corner with my particular RP dystrophy. Now it varies for some others, I've noticed, but in my case, my one, I see almost better when something is a bit further away than when it's right up close. Like, I guess because of the whole tunnel vision thing as well, maybe something is too zoomed in almost, then I don't necessarily see that, oh, this is a hand here because it's so close. Whereas if it's like this, it's like, oh, okay, cool. There's a hand there, So that's how my side works. So generally, like a lot of stuff, sometimes sometimes I guess I look a bit creepy, if I'm looking at someone like maybe 5 to 10 meters away, because that's when I'm seeing them the best, right? And I see maybe the detail on their face and whatever properly, as opposed to them being like a meter or whatever. And it takes, and the longer I look at something as well, the more the picture develops or appears a little bit more. So once again, I'm gonna look creepy because I'm looking. And over time, it's like, so so yeah, that's the way it works for me. But like, I can laugh about all these things now because I become aware of it now.
Yeah.
I'm self-aware, so I know what are my weaknesses or my strengths, whatever kind of thing. So yeah, that's pretty much how it works.
And a question. So something you mentioned, which I think is quite profound. You said that it was harder in the 2 years where you didn't know what was going on, and actually getting a diagnosis was more for relief. Do you remember the initial period when you found out? What was the feeling like? Talk to me about that sense of relief, or at least understanding, like, okay, well, at least I know what it is that I have now. Did that change? Talk to me about the feeling, and I'd love to know, like, did it change the outlook that you had? Just being able to put a name to what it was.
Well, I'll start with the day when I first went to that ophthalmologist, did all the tests and stuff.
Yeah.
Then she said, okay, I have a suspicion. I think I feel like I know what your condition is, but you need to do these other kinds of scans. I think ERG scans, if I'm not mistaken. What it stands for now, I cannot remember them. Okay, I forgot the word right now. But yeah, so the only two places in the country that did that in Pretoria or Cape Town. So I'm being from Durban. They needed to make that appointment. So she set up the appointment, but because those were the only two places in the country that did that at the time, I don't know now. That's why I say at the time. So yeah, because those were the only two places, there was sort of like a waiting list. So from the day when I first saw her to that appointment in Pretoria, it was like 4 months later. So,
It's a long
in the
wait.
interim, it's a very long wait, because you're so anxious. You're like, man, wonder what she thinks it is and whatever. But I guess let's just see. Because honestly, I always went to the ophthalmologist with the intention of, let me just find out what the hell's wrong with me, or let them just diagnose and figure out whatever, so we can finally know what it is. Then I can get surgery and whatever, or laser eye therapy, or whatever the case is, then sort it out, and I can be back to normal and carry on with life and doing stuff as I knew.
So
That
in the
that
period,
was
in
always
those two
my
years,
mindset.
you always thought that there would be not a quick solve, because obviously it took time, but you thought, cool, my eyesight will
Sort of
be
cure.
remedied. And was that
Yeah.
was that almost faith? Did it ever waver, or were you almost like, is it like almost, that's the way I see it? I'm not gonna think in another way. Or were there periods of where doubt crept in?
During that time, honestly, I didn't have any doubt. Like
Mm.
I was genuinely so sure that it's cool, whatever. Like when I was trying to job hunt or whatever, whether I was trying stuff in different call centers or whatever, my whole thing was, I'm gonna try to build up enough money so I can eventually do this kind of surgeries or whatever that will follow once I've been diagnosed, or. So yeah, I was always confident of that.
And where does that, like, that confidence and tenacity come from? Because I could imagine for a lot of people in a similar situation, it's so easy to be down in the dumps, to be depressed.
Yeah.
When you look back, where does it come from? I mean, or who does it come from? Because it's a very rare thing to have.
Yeah. Honestly, at that stage, I wouldn't necessarily say. I guess in my mind, I wouldn't even necessarily have thought of it as very tenacious or anything. But I guess I could say maybe it comes from my mom, I guess. Yeah, like she's genuinely someone who's always been like a very strong, driven person.
Mm.
She she's pretty much been the rock or the foundation of my family. I could quite easily say. I'm pretty sure her husband, my dad. uh, 2 plus 2 kids equals 4. My siblings, everyone. Yeah, I mean, honestly, anyone who genuinely just watches an action, she's always the one leading, doing stuff, whatever, at family functions, events, whatever crisis situations and stuff. She's there to assist, to help. And I guess she was even, I guess that also showed in the fact that she was a matron even at the clinic where she worked and stuff. So even the way you'd see everyone would respect her, not just
Mm.
colleagues, but even the general community. Like, can't tell you the number of times where I'd be going with her somewhere, we walking around at some store. Oh, Mrs. Nyawose, oh, wait, what? And then I'm like, who's that? Someone who was once a patient, what? I'm like, so it's a random thing I've ever heard. I'm like, were you like his nurse or something? She's like, no. Like, okay. But that thing just keeps happening like all the time and stuff. You just see the way people always react and respond to it and all of that kind of stuff. So with her, she grew up in the farms in the Eastern Cape, like rural area. And she lost her mom around the age of 18. yeah, she was 18 or 19, and she basically left Eastern Cape to come to Durban to do nursing and stuff, and I mean that's quite a big change, around that time. Also having recently, losing your mom, whatever. Like I think she was doing her first year or maybe or something, when she lost her mom and stuff. So all that stuff, but she still pushed through and kept improving her qualifications throughout her career and stuff as well. And yeah, she's always been someone who's always keen to learn new stuff and whatever. So yeah, I guess it probably comes from her, I would say.
And
I never actually thought about it before, but yeah.
And just two things on that. So, I mean, you mentioned she's a nurse. And like, it must be, I always hear of people who have parents in the medical fraternity, how they're never as worried when a child has an ailment, because they're like, well, I've seen everything before. So I'd love to know, like, what was the sense from the family during this time, like the 2 years, where there was no answer, and then when you got the answer, how was your family taking it? And then for the listeners, I'll then give you the friend's perspective. Ndumiso and I have known each other pretty much our entire life, so yeah, it's quite funny. We're speaking in third persons, like we don't know each other, but we know each other exceptionally well.
The jig is up. All right, cool. Now that you've exposed this, bro, dude, what are we eating after this? Okay, no. All right. So honestly, I would say that period from when I was like struggling at varsity to dropping out of varsity to trying to job hunt or getting jobs, and then like eventually struggling so much that I just had to leave or whatever. It was probably some of the toughest times with my parents, because like I said, they knew how capable I was academically and stuff, So in a way, it just seems like you're just being lazy, or you're not pushing yourself or trying as hard, kind of thing. Because as much as, okay, cool. The unfortunate part, I guess, it just so happens that, at some stages of adversity, as I guess most students do, you party, you fool around, you whatever, So I guess they looked at that and presumed that, that's really the main thing, kind of thing.
Too much indoor soccer on a Friday for Ndumiso.
Yeah, but it was never that, guys. Never that. All right. So, yeah, so yeah, I ended up just feeling like, damn, I just can't catch a break. Like everything I'm trying doesn't seem to work. And like I said, like the problem with RP dystrophy is it's consistently inconsistent. Like literally I could be seeing something there now, I look away, then I look, and now the picture needs time to develop again. Now I need to wait those 5 seconds or whatever before the picture starts to, appear similarly to how I maybe had seen it just now whilst I'd been looking there before, So there's so many things that are going to slow you down in everything you're doing and whatever, Sometimes it's just like, oh, this is such a mission trying to do this or that or whatever, or moving from point A to point B, and etc. etc. So yeah, it was a bit of a rough time because I think it was just no one. I just felt completely like no one genuinely understands out of everyone around me. It just felt like no one really understands what I'm going through, and I can't even really explain what I'm going through. So yeah, it's like you tell someone you can't see something, and then like another time you can see it, or something from a similar range or whatever. And it's like, this guy's messing with us, And people know me as someone who just tells jokes and talks nonsense all the time as well.
Mm.
So I hate doing it. You know, sure. So I think it was just a mix of a whole lot of that more than anything, which is why I also believe knowing about my condition in the end was so important. You know, then it made it easier as well to communicate what was happening around me and or with me, you know, to others. So then they no longer would bombard me with questions and or insults or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, you know, and from a friend perspective, I remember that time. So I mean, you were at UKZN, I was at UCT, and I remember coming home for holidays the one time when we played soccer. I mean, I love how our life just revolves around football.
Yeah.
And I remember that we were playing on a Tuesday, and I think you tried to slide tackle me, but the slide tackle was very late. So I'm like, yo, Ndumiso is trying to destroy my ankles. But it happened 3 or 4 times. And I remember one of our other friends told us, like, yo, Ndumiso has been doing this a lot. And that was the first time I got a hint of what was going on. But we didn't really say much about it, right? We just carried on with life. And then it was a case of, you know, you stopped driving. And we didn't really have an answer. I think to your point, I think you didn't really share much because you also didn't know what was going on, right? And it was
and at the same time, no one else shared anything with me to say, dude, I think you might be having such and such a problem.
And that's the thing I always look back on, and I think about, especially within our friendship group. We're exceptionally close, but we never grew up being very open in terms of an emotional openness.
Emotionally,
It's very much like, oh, we just carry on. Like everything was at face value, and we carried on. The first time, you know, one of the things that have come out of your condition is it has taught us as a friend group to actually talk about things in a more open way. Because I remember, like, you know, for 2 years, exactly to your point, we were like, yo, Ndumiso's dropped out of university. You know, and for me, it's like, but I can't understand why. If your friend is taking drugs, or if they're an alcoholic and they've dropped out, you know, if they're stupid, you can tell why. Because you're like, well, this guy just can't. With you, it was a case of like, what is going on? No one really had an answer, and it wasn't like, you know, almost if you were a drug addict, it would have been easier for us to pinpoint. It was because we'd be like, well,
how do you know I wasn't, bro?
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. And so it, for me, it was as your friend, it was a very, for our friend group, I think we carried on as normal, which I think is an issue, right? We almost, we'd be like, yo, we don't know what's going on, but no one would address it, which I think is a lesson. And I think times have changed, and there's a lot more acceptance in being open, which I think is great. And you know, I think with all of us, I wouldn't say we're vain, but typical boys in their early 20s laugh everything off. Masculinity is also something, it's not a concept you think about, but you know, being man, you don't want to talk about these things. And now it's actually,
I'm struggling.
No one says that, right? If anything, you'll say you're struggling in a joke. You won't say it in those words.
Exactly.
You'll say it in a way hoping someone will catch on. And if no one catches on, you just keep quiet. So you know, it's a very, I can imagine it's a very tough space. And the thing I've mentioned to you a lot of times is I've really admired the positivity and how you've just got on with it, right? At no point could I ever be like, your personality's changed. No point did to come across as you were depressed. It was, you know, you carried on. You didn't talk about it. And looking back, I wish we had more open conversations. But the one thing I remember coming through all of this is the relief when you figured something out, because it was almost 2 years. No one really knew what was going on. And then one day you came to say, well, guys, I remember you had the conversation with me, like, listen, I have this condition and I have a backstory for what's been going on over the last 2 years, right? You pieced it together for me for more than 2 years. You pieced it together for me. And only then did it start ticking. Okay, shit, this is everything that's been happening in your life. For the most part, it was just like, well, Ndumiso's not going to university. He can't tackle anymore. we don't know what's going on. The two aren't correlated, but you know, that's almost how we thought of it, right? We were young and stupid.
I like how that's in your top 2 list.
Again, I just
Not
told you how our
not like
priorities.
not like he bumped into someone whilst we were walking around in Checkers. No, he can't.
And do you know the crazy thing, right? Is growing up also. You were slightly older than us, so you're like I think 3 years older than the majority of us. So we always looked up to you and stuff, and we took your lead. And no one ever thought to ask like, hey, let's have a sit down and tell us exactly what's happening. Again, it was all just at face value. And you've always known that we always would play at your house and stuff, so you were the leader. And I wanted to know, like, in that time, because the other thing I know about you is you're a little vain, and you can admit it. So
It's like crazy.
Talk to me about
I'm
that.
leaving this show. This podcast is a waste of
as someone who's like, outward perceptions matter to you, right? And I know that because I've grown up with you, and as a result, outward perceptions of how people perceive me also matter to me. You can see, cut from the same cloth.
I don't know what the fuck is on. Yeah.
How did you feel in this time, right? As you've mentioned, like, one of the things you mentioned a lot is like you bumping into things, having to ask people to assist or like tell you things that you didn't have to. How do you feel about that? Were you like, I think your thinking has come a long way, but initially were you hesitant? Were you ashamed? Were you embarrassed? What was the sense when almost the way in which you navigate to the world started changing? How did you feel having to almost tell people, whether you knew them or not, like, hey, listen, do you mind just pointing me in the right direction? Do you mind if I just put my hand on your shoulder? How did you feel about that at that time? I could almost imagine it was pre-diagnosis. Like I could, and then like I could almost imagine it was almost easier for you to do that with people who you didn't know versus people that you did know. Or am I mistaken?
Okay. In terms of during that time, I would say I never really okay. But like, so maybe things that might happen is maybe bumping into people or sort of stumbling over something, but maybe it's because the lighting wasn't great, you know, because bright lighting works best for me, you know. But at the same time, I don't necessarily want the lighting in my face, but I just wanted to illuminate on whatever target I'm looking at. That in a perfect world. So not blocking me off, but illuminate on the thing. So yeah, or maybe I'd stumble over stuff, or like I recall the one time with my other friend at like some party and stuff, and he was like, "Okay, cool, dude, you're gonna try. We need to go fetch like my brother's car, something like that. So you drive this one, I'll drive that one, kind of thing." This was now around that time when I knew something wasn't right with my side, you know, but I couldn't tell anyone what it is or whatever, right? So I remember, I don't even know what I said, but I made some lame excuse though. That much I know for sure, you know, on why I couldn't drive, you know, that night or whatever, because he knew that I had a license. So it was like, oh, dude, what the hell, you know? So I remember I just brushed it off with whatever lame excuse, you know, or even times when maybe friends might invite me out somewhere at night, and I'm just like, hey. Part of me, I remember times where, like, if no one was at home, I would get into the vehicle in the yard or whatever, like reverse it out and stuff. But even reversing it out, it was like I wasn't able to properly check like the blind spot or whatever anymore, like 100%, you know. This was at the time, probably a few months before I ended up going to the next ophthalmologist.
Yeah.
So by that time, yeah, I guess I could say I was feeling ashamed or embarrassed or whatever, because I'm doing all these things which I guess which is also messed up, but which people would maybe laugh at when you go and you mess up and you do something stupid, or you trip or you fall, you bump into someone and whatever. but people sometimes laugh at that. Look at this dude, what are you doing, bro? Like, kind of thing. So it becomes very hard as well to maybe open up to people. So I never really used to, I don't know, like at no stage did I ever have to ask someone like, can I put my hand on your shoulder or whatever? Because I didn't even know all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I hadn't yet been trained on that stuff, which I later learned once I'd known about my condition. So yeah, it was pretty much just trying to navigate stuff in a way where let me try avoid the things which I've noticed seem to be an issue for me. Like at night seems to be an issue for me lately,
And
or
what did that
unless
mean?
it's somewhere where I'm comfortable.
Yeah. Does that mean you ended up like? Did you almost go into a bit of a shell and spend more and more time at home to almost remove yourself from those situations?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, I wasn't working and stuff as well, so yeah. I think it was a lot of that,
Sure.
yeah.
And
But yeah, like
looking,
you say though,
yeah,
my personality never necessarily changed or anything. No, I
no.
don't believe so anyway. So yeah, but yeah, I guess I was putting on a mask, if you will, yeah, to some extent.
It's and that's the thing. Like it was if it was a mask, it was a very effective mask because at no point, did we ever doubt. So tell me then, like I'm sure it's a bit of a double-edged sword when you get your you get the diagnosis because finally you have an answer, but at the same time you have to then confront this belief you've had that once I know what's wrong, I can get a surgery and my eyes will be corrected. Because what the ophthalmologist tells you is that your genetic eye condition doesn't necessarily have a cure, correct? So,
Yeah.
so what's the feeling there? Because that is a double-edged sword. It's like, okay, fine, I finally know, but it's not the answer that I was potentially expecting.
Honestly, I'll literally never forget the moment that she told me because we were sitting in her office. I'd come back from Pretoria. The results were back with her a month later. So from the first time I had seen her in January, she now called me back. This was like in May. And yeah, so my mom and she was sitting there in her office. She's sitting at her desk and stuff, and she's like, okay, so we've got the results and what. And yeah, it confirms my suspicions. Yeah, you have a condition called RP dystrophy. That it's not that common. It's quite rare actually. But yeah, it can be a bit genetic and skips generations because she had also asked about family history and that kind of stuff and whatever. There wasn't anything too amazing. Although when I thought about it afterwards, it's like, okay, well, my mom's dad went blind, but that was when he was already like old. How old? Maybe 60 something. I'm not sure. But even then, something I also learned at a later stage about RP dystrophy was that generally it affects people a bit more at a later stage compared to when I was affected, or at least to the extent that I was affected anyway. So, on average, it might start being at my sight level, maybe around your 40s or, onwards kind of thing. 40s, 50s, 60s, that kind of stuff, but not when you're like your early 20s, but it can, not that it can't. And also, so I remember her telling me, so I was like, oh, okay, so what, like, what surgery or treatment or whatever can I do, or do I have to take medication or what? And she's like, you unfortunately, it can't really be corrected. There's no surgery, no treatment, no medication available. And I remember like, phew. But internally, I was thinking, wow, that is wild. That totally blows my mind and takes away everything I was thinking coming into this, But I'm sure if you were to ask her, how did I react? Oh, he was fine. He was okay. Because I was literally just like, okay. It's like, so nothing. And she's like, no. I was like, oh, okay. Okay. And so, why does it stay like this? Or she says, or she also did inform me that it was a condition that it's degenerative. So in some instances, some people end up becoming totally blind from it, as it keeps degenerating. In other instances, it stays more or less stable, or it decreases to a point and then, becomes stable from there, or whatever. It varies per person, So I was like, wow, so there's the potential I could become totally blind. It's like, at this stage, though, looking at yours, it seems like I wouldn't say that's anything that might happen anytime soon. It doesn't necessarily seem so, but obviously you can never gauge what can happen over time, 10, 20, 30 years or whatever from now, So I was like, oh, okay, that's hectic. I was like, okay, all right, no. I was like, okay, no, cool. Thanks, doc, and whatever, And then she said, well, maybe you can also do some therapy or something. There are therapy groups or whatever where you can maybe talk to people in similar or with similar kinds of conditions or whatever, I was just like, okay, cool. But as you say, we were never necessarily in the habit of opening up and sharing emotions and that kind of stuff. So when I heard the counseling part, I was just like, I don't want counseling. I just want to get my eyesight back, So yeah, came home that day, and I just thought, sure, this is crazy. This like changes my whole life. Like she's literally just told me something that's gonna change my life until the day I die. I was like, whoa. It means I'm never gonna drive again. I'm never gonna do all these other things that I always dreamt of doing, always assumed I would do, like a whole lot of different stuff. Like, like even I always had dreams or aspirations of like, becoming a TV presenter and that kind of stuff, And I was like, sure. No wonder I struggled to read the auto cue when I was doing that other audition and stuff, I was like, damn, because I recall every stage I literally passed, whether if I did my own pre-rehearsed script that I made up, or even when they handed us the script and I had 5 minutes to learn it kind of thing, or like 10 minutes to learn it, and then you got to present it or whatever. All right, cool. It's like 2 paragraphs and stuff. Okay, cool. I go over it. And then I'm like, okay, cool. Did it, killed it, no problem. Yeah, going through every round until the round where it was the auto cue. And the same thing happened 2 different auditions, Because I remember the one, I was like the dude's like talking, hey, how are you? I'm good, I'm cool, bro. What's up? He's like, yeah, no, I'm good, man, no, whatever, All right, so you're just gonna look at the camera, you're gonna say who you are, where you're from, blah, 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 and then you just read what's on the card thing. I was like, okay, cool. I recall looking at I could see the camera, but like underneath it, I could tell there was like a cardboard kind of thing, but the actual writing or the content on it, I could not see. Or it was blurry or whatever, or it's just like there was some sort of fog or whatever there, And the dude's already said action, or he's 3, 2, 1. I'm like, oh, but then the other thing he did say is, or if you feel comfortable, you just say your own thing. Like the one I recall. So I'm like, and now you're frozen, like I'm like, oh, what's going on here? Why can't I read this thing? Like it's there, but like I can't read this thing. and there's the camera. The dude's counting down. I need to say something. What was I supposed to say? Oh no, I need to say my name. Okay, cool. So then I start off. I'm like, okay, cool, 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 cool. I do the thing, and then I'm literally just freestyling a script now. But
Yeah.
now you're freestyling in panic mode, kind of thing, you know. So yeah, I ended up tripping up at that stage, and that was like a top. I think by that stage it was like the top 30 or something like that, or you know, and there'd been like thousands of people. So like I'd been progressing nicely, but I was like, phew. And I always had like that thing, like, man, what the hell happened that day, you know? So obviously now, having learned this, I like my mind went back to all those moments, adversity. This is why when I'm be writing, like the shadows like blocking my eye, you know, because like I said,
Mm.
something that's dark is exaggerated to me. So it was so that I couldn't even see what I was writing until I literally had to take my hand away. And then I could read the thing. Oh, okay, I did write. But now, oh, snap, I didn't write properly on the line. It was going a little bit skew, you know? So, like, all these things started coming back to me and stuff. Like, you know, over time as well, more and more stuff came back to me. So it was just like, man, this is extremely life changing.
Mm.
Like the whole life I've known is pretty much changed, or it's going to change, or yeah, you know. So I was just like, okay, well, and like I said, I'd never known anyone was partially sighted before. So at that stage, you feel completely alone. It's like, yo, this is mad. So yeah, I think I recall. Yeah, probably the first time I cried about it was that day, you know, that night. I recall crying about it in my room, maybe for like 5 minutes, thinking of all the things that I probably would never do, you know?
Mm.
And then think, yeah, okay. Then my mom and I had a conversation like that night as well, talking about, she was also now reflecting back on all the different, so this is why you struggled with this. This is why I recall you doing this, or, you know,
Mm.
all these things came back, and then we both just cried, you know. That was like another 5 minutes. So I guess that was my counseling. uh, then, yeah. So then, yeah, it was like, okay, cool. The next day is here. What do I do? You know? So the next day, I was just like, man, what am I going to do? That means, like, I can't do anything, you know? I don't know what I'm going to do. So, I think the next day, okay, well, I think by that time my mom had already informed my siblings. Yeah. So if it wasn't the next day, I think the next day I was just, I wouldn't even say I was depressed as such. I guess there may have been a slight form of depression, but I guess I just felt numb more than anything. I was just like,
You're
mm,
definitely going through the stages of grieving in
mm,
in some way. I mean, it's a loss.
mm,
It's a deep loss, especially for
short.
for um the life you envisioned, the person you are, how you view yourself. In many ways, I could
Mm,
imagine it's almost mourning for a sense of self that is
mm,
no longer there, or it has been taken away.
exactly. Yeah, no, true. 100%, bro. So I think then 2 days later, uh, was WhatsApp around then? Were we WhatsApping in those days, or was it
I think
like
maybe
BBM? I think it was, no? I
yeah, I
think
think it was
so,
WhatsApp.
yeah. So I remember sending you guys a WhatsApp like 2 nights later, informing you guys about the whole story and whatever, that I'd now been diagnosed with this and all of that, you know. And I think, yeah, you guys were probably the first people I'd informed outside of, well, yeah, outside of my family knowing. Yeah, I think I kept it at that pretty much. Um, I think probably for like the first month, I didn't really go out or go anywhere, even with people who I knew or whatever. Because now, in a way, you become self-conscious about this thing,
Mm.
Like, man, I've got RP dystrophy, Like, eh, what are people gonna say when I tell them this? Or how are they gonna treat me? Or,
What was
what
your
can
worst fear in that regard?
uh, I guess almost like they're gonna shy away from me kind of thing, I guess.
And
Yeah.
has that ever happened?
Honestly, yeah. Some people, I lost contact with some people because, when you're young, you in your 20s, it's like, oh, dude, let's go out. Let's meet up at this place. I'm like, how will I even get there? I
Mm.
can't drive there. And generally, young people want to meet up at night, right? So that's what we do. You meet up in the evenings a lot of the time. It's too dark for me. But how am I? That sounds like such a lame thing to say. No, it's too dark. Like you sound like you're a kid, kind of thing, right? So yeah, I think I just generally avoided people. So I ended up losing contact with some people. Um, yeah, because even when some people did find out, the one thing I definitely noticed was people became scared to talk to me, you know. But personality wise, I didn't change from who I was,
Mm.
But they were now like scared to talk to me. Like, you can feel like people are looking at you,
Yeah.
but rather than just coming to you and saying something, because they'd already heard by that time. For example, like when I'd go to the church and stuff that my family goes to, by that time I knew people knew, you know. Some people, church people, oh, I'm so sorry. And then they hug you and whatever without
Mm.
specifying what they talk about. So you already know, right, cool, whatever. You understand. They're just trying to be supportive, and so that's okay.
Yeah.
Others take the opposite route, and generally that's what young people do. Young people are scared to deal with anything that's hectic or too heavy or whatever, or at least at that time. So a lot of the younger people, they'd be the ones who would be like, they'll just stand and like look at me or whatever. Hey, how's it going, bro? You good, bro? You just
Yeah.
you just feel the air is different now.
Yeah.
They're not reacting to me the way they did literally 2 months ago, kind of thing. Mm. All
And
right, yeah.
I know everyone's different, and everyone has their own preference. But for you in that instance, how is it best for someone to deal in that situation when they're speaking to someone where they know that they can't relate. They feel sorry, but they can't relate, right? It's similar to if you and forgive me if it's an incorrect comparison, but if you go to a funeral, right? How do you the age-old question is, what do I say, and do I say too much, do I say too little? How do I show myself to be sensitive and empathetic as I am without being offensive?
Sure. For me, the biggest thing or the best advice I can give again, but actually, let me actually relate it to myself because they say everyone's different.
Mm.
What I prefer, I love it when people actually ask me about it, but they ask questions. They don't come with their preconceived notions
Mm.
and already then treat me according to that stuff. Like, no, 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 wait, don't do this. He's gonna fall. He's gonna. How? How do you know I can't maybe see the thing that's over there or whatever?
Mm.
Or, because like by now, how I told you, Like I can maybe see something maybe like 5 to 10 meters away, a bit better than here. So what I do normally, if I'm walking along a straight path, I'm looking ahead to spot any potential obstacles that might be coming in my way, so that I'm already prepared for 5 minutes ahead kind of thing. Or I start drifting slightly this way because I notice, even if I can't tell you exactly what the thing is, I notice there's something there kind of thing. If I'm able to walk in a straight path all the way towards it and the lighting conditions are not so dark that I can't see it. So yeah. For me, I love it when people ask me questions. I won't even lie. That's the best.
I remember when I found out
I can talk. I can talk. So
yeah.
I guess for me, that's not too big a schlep. Like I'm okay. Like ask me. I'll tell you everything about it. Whatever. You've literally asked me maybe less than 10 questions, but I've been rambling on the whole day already.
But I remember when you told me about the diagnosis. I remember, like, to your point, and I'm glad that's how you feel, because I remember thinking after we spoke, I'm like, I pretty much just treated Ndumiso like a Wikipedia page. I asked you question after question after question about it because I wanted to understand. I mean, looking back, and when was this? This was 2015.
Yes.
This was 7 years ago. The journey since then, and I mean, we've been talking for ages. We haven't even got to the accolade at the end, which is
South African Sports Administrator trilogy.
South African Sports Administrator of the Year. 7 years on, that wasn't even something that was on the horizon. I mean, I'll get to a spoiler that we'll cover, but I mean, you went back to university, you got your degree, which in and of itself was a massive feat.
Dude,
that wasn't even a consideration at that point, right? Yeah. At that point, when I remember the conversations, there was a lot around, well, I need to get in contact with the Blind Society. I'm not sure what they do, but that's what I've been told is a good next step, right? Fast forward 7 years, everything that's come, and the Blind Society, KZN, Blind Cricket, South African Blind Cricket, Sports Administrator, they're all interlinked. So maybe talk to us about that period, of you're at home now, you have the diagnosis, there's a deep sense of loss, and then maybe talk about your first encounter with the Blind Society and what that means for you, and meeting people who have similar conditions, or understand your world a bit better.
Sure. Okay, so I think firstly, like you said, by the time I was talking to you about it and we had that whole I guess interview, as you did.
I was testing out for carte blanche with you,
no, bro. Get ignited, yeah. So honestly, I would say my mourning period, or my phase of depression, if you will, lasted about a month. Even then, I wouldn't say it was extreme as such, but yeah, I'd say it was a month where I was just like, this is crazy. I will wake up every day, I go to sleep every night, my condition is still the same in the morning, like, man, this is genuinely what it's gonna be like forever. Wow. So yeah, I think after that first month, then I was now at a point of, okay, well, what am I gonna do? What can I do? I mean, as maybe as naive or as stupid or just oblivious to the world, at that stage, I literally feel like, man, I'm the only person I don't even know the term partially sighted at that stage. I'm the only person who's like blind but not blind. This is crazy. Like, Because I've also been told it's a rare eye condition, by someone who's a specialist in, dealing with eyesight and so on. So I'm just like, this is madness. Like, what is there for someone in my niche world, kind of thing, So, honestly, I don't know what it was, but something just told me, okay, I need to find a new way. Oh, okay. I know. Okay. Now I recall what really helped me. The the ophthalmologist referred me to a low vision specialist optometrist. So they have an optometry in Durban North, and like they know how to deal specifically with low vision cases, So when I got there, one of the other things when it comes to RP dystrophy I didn't explain, which is also important, is color contrast. Color contrast. You. If there's something, if there's something black here, and there's something, and there's a black background, I will not see the thing in front. 90% of the time, I won't see it. Even 90 sounds low, but but if there's a white background, boom, it stands out. Like, oh, okay, cool. I can see there is something, Even if, like I said, I might not always necessarily tell you what it is, but just knowing that there's something there generally makes a difference.
Yeah.
Helps me at least to have a target to focus on. That, okay, cool. The longer I look at it, the picture might appear a bit better. Or am I maybe too close to it? If I am, maybe I'll step back a bit to try to see more detail of it. Focus, my tunnel vision a bit more all the way from the top to bottom or whatever. That kind of stuff. But as you can imagine, all of that stuff takes time. So being quick is a very big thing which I no longer have in terms of walking around and maneuvering in different places and what. It's particularly if I'm obviously gonna be moving alone or whatever. So yeah. Anyway, get referred to the low vision optometrist. Meet the lady there, and she was a really cool, friendly lady, like really, really awesome. She'd studied optometry and got her degrees at some university in Australia, and like she was chatting like a friend.
Yeah.
And I can say she was probably like the first person I met who, okay, not the first, because even the ophthalmologist understood, but that time I was still being diagnosed or whatever. But she was like the first person I met, I guess, post-diagnosis, who genuinely made me feel like it's 100% okay and normal to be partially sighted. Although still at that stage, I still didn't know the term, but yeah. So, because she just spoke like, that doesn't phase her. Okay, so, I know you were referred by this doctor and so on. So tell me why you're here or whatever. I'm like, well, I'm here to get more appropriate glasses or whatever, because all these just have like the thickest glasses, from your standard optometrist. So now it was a case of, okay, cool, I'm going to a low vision specialist one. So she'd asked me, okay, cool. Right. So just tell me about, your condition or what stuff you struggle with or whatever. So I'd explain all these things that I've been explaining, because also I'd now had the chance to Google this thing, on my phone, like what is RP dystrophy and stuff, and try to read different things about it. And literally, I'm reading it, like some of the things, and I'm like, that's what happens to me. That also happens to me. This also happens to me, like all these things which I can now explain to other people, but I never knew how to explain it, because it was just so unique, like all these things, like, or I just didn't know how to compartmentalize it or whatever at the time, and how to really box it up and say, no, when it's like this is what happens. When it's like this. So that thing also, yeah, I remember like seeing like those like 4 or 5 different kinds of things that they described, although not in as much detail as I've described it, but enough for me to have a foundation or platform of understanding as well, of understanding myself now. Like, okay, oh wow, that's wild. Okay, that does happen to me. Maybe not exactly like this, but it's a modified version of this, or this one is definitely like me, you know. So by that time now, I was then able to express it and explain um, what happens when, and even she was asking all the right questions. So what about when you go from light to dark, or from vice versa, and blah 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 blah. It's like, okay, cool. All right, no, then let's do a couple tests, and like I'm doing the test, I'm trying my best to see this and read that and whatever. And she's like, okay, no, cool, awesome, okay, no, you're actually better than some of the clients I've had, eyesight wise. I'm like, how can you have people with worse eyesight than what I have? That's mad. Like, I couldn't read the autocue thing, which is like 3, 4 meters in front of me, So I'm like, yo, okay, what people does she know? So, so yeah, even something as simple as when I was now trying out different frames for the glasses. She's like, oh, okay, which ones do you like or whatever? Or she's like, what about this one? And she'd hand it to me, kind of thing, rather than someone pointing and saying, what about this one? She'd take it, what about this one? And hand it to me, and not even just like let it linger in front of me, because I might
Put it
not
in your hand.
necessarily see it, or yeah, at least touch it against my chest or whatever. Then obviously I'll take it, kind of thing, or against my arm or whatever. Which are all small little touches, obviously, that I'm aware of now, which at the time I wasn't, So, okay, take it. Okay, seems kind of cool. Then try to maybe look at it from a distance bit or whatever, because like this is like too close. But I'm like, oh, okay, try it on. Try it out like a couple of the frames and stuff, and so then I'd be in the mirror. So like her assistant was like, so which one do you think is the best look? Or it's like, oh, how does it look when I tried the first one? The assistant was asking me. And then this lady, the optometrist, was like, no, take a picture, take a photo for him, So they used the photo for him. Then she took the photo of me wearing the 3 different frames, and then turned up like the screen brightness and whatever. The screen was a pretty decent, like big size kind of screen. And then I was then able to look at it and see. Whereas looking in the mirror, particularly because I wasn't even wearing my glasses, I'm just wearing like those, the general frame. So it's not like I can really see anything in the mirror. So that's even, that kind of insight that the optometrist had, knowing that I wouldn't be able to see the reflection in the mirror with any kind of clarity, So I would need to take the photo and then be able to look at the photo once I'd put on the glasses that I was wearing, the prescription glasses that I had, at the time, So, all that stuff just like, I guess, also showed me that, oh, okay, man, this lady like really knows her way around people like me, So by that time, she then told me, oh, so then we purchased a walking cane that, blind people use to walk around and stuff, and, to practice, to feel essentially their way around, or at least feel potential obstacles or the surface like a meter or two ahead when you walk. So I purchased a cane there. Then for my laptop, they then gave me these stickers on it. So they asked me, okay, well, okay, you like color contrast. So do you prefer like maybe, so they showed me different assortments of color contrasted like paper and stuff, white writing on black background, black writing on a white background, black writing on a yellow, etc., etc., etc. And so I eventually chose the black writing on a yellow background, right? And so they put like those stickers on my keyboard, for each alphabet or each or character or whatever. There was now a sticker, which was a yellow G or a yellow background with a black G, like in bold, like font, essentially, on each character, keyboard character or button, whatever. So, even that, I was like, well, okay, now I can actually use my laptop again. Yay. And, in terms of actually typing stuff. But now I was like, okay, but still reading it, I always have to like zoom in, like really move closely to it to be able to read anything, if that. So then she also told me, well, you can always adjust your settings. Adjust by, magnification settings and stuff. You can adjust in terms of even color contrast, because I know you like color contrast. Try different color settings and all those different things, But obviously you can experiment and see what works. But we were just going through it with her, and she was showing me different kinds of options and things, How's that? Can you read it when it's like this? What if I zoom it in like this? Does that work a bit better? Well, your mouse, you're never going to see your mouse. So change the mouse with pointer settings, make it the largest size, because you can actually adjust the size, all those things. I'm like, oh, wow. All these things that you never would pay attention to if you don't need it, So, yeah. So it went from there. And then she was the one who said, I know some guys who are like totally, who I know these other two brothers, they have a cool personality like you and stuff and whatever. You might be interested in getting to know them. I think, they would be really helpful to you. They're more well versed in all of this now after a couple years and stuff, So she gave me their numbers. I tried to reach out to the one dude. Didn't end up working out really. But anyway, the one other thing she did say though was, in terms of the cane, in order to learn how to use it properly, you get orientation and mobility trainers. She's like, the unfortunate part is there's only like 2 in the province, basically. And yeah, but you can get in touch with them at like, they're at the KZN Blind and Deaf Society, So I was like, okay, cool. But yeah, so I think I then called the society not long thereafter, asked them to teach me how to use the cane or whatever. I don't think there was really much correspondence. Oh, okay, there was a guy there at the time to protect his identity, which I shouldn't, but I will. I won't say his name. But that guy sucked. He was like the social worker in my region, like so the Pinetown area and stuff. And like I recall trying to call and getting the orientation mobility training after they put me through to him or whatever. That didn't really work out much. So the next thing I did was I went to because I think he said, oh, come to the office or whatever if you've never been here before. So I went to the Blind and Deaf Society. I think, who did I go with that day? I think the first day I was there, yeah, I think I'd gone with my mom that day. So yeah, we went up, asked to see the social worker, whatever, cool, in his office. And so, like, yeah, dude. Because before that, I'd actually even Googled schools or whatever. Because I'm like, I need to learn a whole new way of learning now.
Yeah.
you know, because I don't know what made me think of schools for the blind or whatever, or blind schools or something. Because like there has to be some sort of place where they teach us the way they teach people who started losing their sight along the way what to do, you know. Or I think maybe it was my brother something who mentioned, what about learning Braille or something or whatever, you know, because that's all we knew. Yes, that's
Yeah.
what blind people use, right? Cool. So yeah, I think that's how it came about. And then when I'd call schools, they're like, no, this is like a school, like primary school, high school kind of thing. I was like, oh snap. Yeah, I can't really be going to grade 1 now.
Unless you just want to dominate them. 1 plus 1. Idiots.
Suck it, kid.
A question. Why?
You still counting on your
Is
fingers. Yeah.
why is it so hard for someone who has just found out that they have a visual impairment or a disability? Why is it so hard for them to find out where to go for support? Because it sounds like it was exceptionally difficult.
Yeah. I would say it all boils down to, I guess, one, the referral, but also two, I don't think it's well publicized enough, honestly speaking. I rarely see any kind of advertising or anything talking about societies for the blind or all these different things, or even schools for the blind. You rarely find any kind of inserts and all those kinds of things, you know. Like you don't hear it on radio,
Yeah.
which you think would probably be one of the best mediums to reach out to blind people, you know, all that kind of stuff. So
And
yeah,
I mean, all of this happened over quite a lengthy period of time. I mean, not as lengthy as the wait to understand your diagnosis.
yeah.
How did it
So
feel in this period? Because I mean, you've gone from finding out your diagnosis, thinking, okay, cool, well, now it's about fixing and figuring out how to go. And then you find out that this process is frustratingly slow also. You know, how are you feeling through all of it?
okay, so I went from the initial depression and sadness to then, hey, okay, I met this low vision optometrist. Okay, she's cool. This was actually a cool experience. I've now got this thing. I can actually do this on my computer, on a laptop. You know, I've got these stickers now. I zoom in with this. I try this now. I changed the colors completely on my laptop, you know. And I'm like, okay, I'm starting to get somewhere, you know. At least I can still do stuff with a laptop, you know. So technology at least can seemingly meet me halfway. Cool. We're gonna get a move on. Stuff is gonna start to happen. I don't know what yet, but I'm feeling a lot more positive now at that stage, you know. And that's maybe late 2015. Yeah, second half of 2015 when I'd met that optometrist now. So between then to now trying to get all this stuff to happen and with the society and this guy, that ends up going into 2016. And I can honestly say the only thing that I got out of that guy was essentially the fact that have you applied yet for a disability grant at SASA or whatever? I'm like, no.
So you didn't even know at this point that you were eligible for a disability grant.
No. Literally,
not from
I
the
thought
ophthalmologist,
someone.
not from
Nope,
anyone.
nope.
So there really isn't
That's why I
a
say it goes back to
how to use a
referrals.
guide here.
It's all about referrals. If you just happen to get the right person who is well versed in dealing with blindness or people who are visually impaired, and they have all the contacts or the relevant info or whatever the case is, then you're fortunate. Otherwise, you just stumble your way across some information, which is a very, very unfortunate thing. Because, yeah, so much time can be lost in sitting around not even knowing that there's maybe this kind of potential opportunity on this or that,
That's
the particular
devastating.
terms and stuff.
And when did you go back to university? I know I'm skipping ahead here, but when did you go back to university? What year?
2018.
So it took you 3 years from, or 2.5 years or so, from getting your diagnosis to getting back to university.
Yeah.
When did that, the thought of going back to university, when did that first come up, or the idea, and how long from that idea to actually getting to university? And then maybe talk to us about your university experience and graduating.
Okay. Yo, that's a lot of stuff.
That is a lot of stuff. Sorry, I've taken liberties because I know you, and I've just dumped you with the 4 questions in one. Very bad interview technique.
So I'm supposed to be the presenter, right? All right, bro. So the idea of even going to university or going back to university was honestly one which it didn't even exist, I guess, at some stage for me. Once I'd been diagnosed and all of that. As much as cool, I knew I'm using this laptop now. All right, cool. But I'm already thinking maybe I can just be like someone who writes stuff. I don't know yet. Honestly, like you have no real general direction of. I'm like, man, the only blind person I know is Stevie Wonder or something. You know, So, hey, okay. So yeah, the idea came in 2017 because I was so fortunate that the original guy I had met at the Blind and Deaf Society, I heard he left. I don't know exactly how, but either way, thank goodness, because I submitted multiple documents to the guy, like on different occasions, and you haven't yet given me your ID copy, or you haven't yet given me this, and I'm like, dude, I know we did those things, because I did those things with my family and stuff, so I know full well that we gave you those things. There's no ways I wouldn't. This thing is way too important to me not to, And so he's just like, oh, well, I've been waiting on you, because I was on the call, like, dude, you told me, give you the stuff, and then like a month or two, you'll tell me about potential learnerships or something that I can do. So what happened to that? Or some sort of training class? Because I think I'd also asked him about, or he'd mentioned something about studying Braille or something, maybe, I think, or a learnership, or getting a learnership.
Yeah.
So what happened was that social worker changed, then another one came. And the new lady now who replaced that guy, honestly, was one of the most important people in my life. Because she came through, called me, she's like, hey, I have your file here. This is now like, I mean, I had submitted stuff probably for the second time to this guy by January or February 2016. And things were just quiet, basically. She called me. It was probably like October, She's like, hey, I have your file here. My name's Ugendri. I'm the new social worker for the Pinetown area, what. I don't know, maybe if you would like to come and meet whatever at the office and what. So I'm like, hey folks, get a lot of this. People at the Blind and Deaf Society are calling. You know, it's another one. It's another social worker. So, so cool. We rolled through. We got our game faces on. This time we're taking no prisoners. Then we're gonna hear her talk her nonsense, then tell her what's up. So come through, and yeah, she's friendly and hi, how are you? What? So I believe you want to, or you had submitted your documents. Why did you discuss on it? I'm like, the previous homie said he was gonna hook me up with learnerships and lessons on this and that and whatever. Dude did nothing, and he's just been quiet ever since. And she's like, oh, okay. She sensed the mood was a bit sour. She's like, oh, okay. All right. Well, we do have braille classes and computer lessons for the blind that we teach here. I believe those are gonna start, but unfortunately, those start early in the year. So those will be starting most likely at the beginning of February or maybe in late Jan. So I'm like, here we go again. I was like, so would you like to do those? I'm like, yeah, sure. I'd like to do both. She's like, oh, you want to do both of them like at the same time? I'm like, yeah, I want to do both. Like for me, learning is not the issue. I've always wanted to learn, kind of thing. So, and I need to catch up because the unfortunate part is I'm in a weird position that I basically have to relearn everything about life, but now from the perspective of a visually impaired person. I have to learn how to do all the things which you wouldn't even think about, which all the small stuff. Like I can't just read a newspaper. I can't just do stuff that I was just doing casually, not even thinking about. I don't just write stuff and casually and whatever. So
I just want to comment on that. I think it's something I learned from you, which I'd never really given thought to before. Is I think given that if you ask any person without a disability, would they, would you want to spend X amount of time, completely able-bodied and then have suffered disability? And I think almost anyone without any thought would say yes immediately, right? And you don't realize how tough it is to transition. And I think you said, and I'm paraphrasing what you said, but you said you were at such a disadvantage in comparison to everyone else who was born with a disability, because that was all they had ever known, and so they had learned how to cope with it from day one. Whereas for you, you had to transition out of what you had previously known and learn something new from scratch, whilst also unlearning everything you had previously, and just how tough it was. To hear you say, it was, for me, it was very eye-opening to hear, or ear-opening to hear. Someone mentioned, like, to have been able-bodied and then to transition is actually putting me at a disadvantage. It's something that I don't think, unless you're in that situation, you'd ever think about. But it really made me pause and think, well, shit, it's not as clear cut as people think. There's so much subtlety and nuance and gray across that entire spectrum, and it's not easy either way. But yeah, sorry, I just wanted to interject to share that perspective, because it really was a fundamental shift in how I perceived it.
Sure. Yeah, because honestly, it was my experience, I guess, at the Blind and Deaf Society that made me realize that. Because I was, okay, basically fast tracking from when she said, oh, we start the lessons, what, early next year. it turned out she actually kept to her word.
Mm.
Called me in January the next year and said, "Hey, look, classes are starting next week. So just come meet me in the office, please. Or they want to go over some stuff. I want you to meet someone who stays in, the area next to where I stay." And so she introduced me to this one other dude. And then he even told me that there's actually a bus that I can take in terms of transport, because it was going to be expensive driving every day, because now the unfortunate part is I always have to get someone who's maybe going to drive me, because I probably wouldn't get there in time if I was going to have to take taxis. And I'm not yet trained on how to use the cane. Honestly, I'm still a bit scared as well. Like, man, I could get knocked by a car or trip over somewhere, or anything could happen. I'm not yet so comfortable in all of this, So yeah, so she introduced me to that dude, and then so he told me about this bus, that which route it takes and whatnot. It's like, okay, cool, okay, I think I could work with that. So after meeting that guy, I then went and applied for the bus to card or whatever that you get, and also so like more and more I was gaining more information, but all the information you gain, once again, goes on which people do you bump into generally. At least in this instance, though, the information I was gaining was now coming from the right place, like the Blind and Deaf Society, which is why I say referrals are the most important thing. That's like the name of the game when it comes to visual impairment, correct referrals too. So, being at the Blind and Deaf Society, started learning computer. That was the first course that I was going to do. Honestly, I would say I gained more in terms of just mingling and interacting with all the other people that I met there. Because then I met other visually impaired people. Other people were partially sighted, Like, oh, wow, there's so many. I met some today. I met others the next week. And now and then others would come and visit. And I'm like, this person's also partially sighted. I first learned the word partially sighted on my first day in the computer class. I remember the one dude came up to me and he was like, "Hey," like, "Sure." And he's like, "Are you partial? Are you partially, And and so like normally the way like black people will say it sometimes will be like, are you partial? You don't even necessarily complete the whole term. Yeah, but just say partial. Yeah, well, are you partial? I'm like, I'm not. I don't even know what he's talking about.
Partial to what?
Yeah, right. And now, and also remember, it's in Zulu as well. So, hey, partial. Yeah, boy. And I'm like, what? He's like, are you partial? I'm like, no. I'm like, what?
How dare you? I'm not partial, you're partial. What are you saying to me?
I don't know what he's telling me. Right? What's up with this guy? He's like, do you want to play cricket? Right? I'm like, hey, bro, I can't see.
He's like, this guy, he's not partially sighted, he's stupid.
So this guy's like, yeah, basically he gave me one of those looks like, this guy is gonna be a lot of work. Like he just like looks at me, he's just like, just come to the field on Saturday. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, but how are we gonna play? Like I can't see, like, I wouldn't be able to see the ball or anything, you know. It's like, hey, just come to the field on Saturday, man. And then he leaves.
Some Mr. Miyagi
And
shit.
so I'm like, okay, which field? And he's like, Kingsmead Stadium.
You're like, this
Guy
man
just wants to go to Kingsmead Stadium. This guy's a psycho. Who is this guy in the first place anyway? I don't see the guy the rest of the week until the Friday. This was on Monday morning, my first day there. So anyway, whilst I'm chilling in the class,
so wait, he invites you to cricket on the first day you get to your lesson.
My very first day, and even worse,
Divine intervention,
bro. Even worse, the lesson hadn't even really started as such.
That team was desperate for players, man.
The teacher was yeah, I know, very. How do you just literally just see somebody go, are you passing? Yes, well, come play this Saturday at Kingsmead. And then he goes.
It's like I didn't even come to the lesson. I came for recruitment. I'm out. I'm just coming back on Friday to remind you.
And if you're serious about your recruitment, shouldn't you take my details? Then you didn't even take my details. So I was just like,
he knows how it works. You come across as more attractive if you're mysterious.
Yeah, basically, he had.
You went home and be like, I need to play me some cricket, man. Jeez.
I was hooked. So yeah. So the teacher who was teaching the computer class, he comes in. And then the same dude I met the week before who told me about the bus and stuff, he's like, oh, hey, dude, you also in this class? Yeah, cool. All right, cool. I know someone. Yeah, all right, cool. Then the teachers, like, just generally talking and stuff. And so when I'd been talking to the teacher before this other dude came in, I asked him, I was like, yo. He's like, yo. And I'm like, do you also have like an eyesight problem or whatever? He's like, oh, no. I teach computer class or whatever. I was like, oh, okay, all right, cool. And then we're just talking, and it turned out he also went to UKZN and blah, 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 just general conversation. Then, like, these other chicks come through. So now these ladies come, and so they're like making noise kind of thing, you know, so that the one, she's like, she comes to me and she like waves and stuff or whatever. And but she can't like talk, you know? So she's like, whatever, like making a noise while she's like signing, you know, doing sign language. So I'm like, oh, okay, this girl must be deaf, you know, because it's the blind and deaf society, right? Oh, well, one, I can't see what she's signing. Two, I don't know sign language. So she's busy signing stuff and whatever. And so now this dude, the teacher, he's like, he goes, hey. And so now he starts talking to her, signing. And so I'm watching the two of them basically signing now. And I don't know what's going on. Right. And he goes, this girl says you're cute or whatever. And I'm like, oh.
You're getting invited to cricket, you're getting hit on, everything's
bro,
happening.
What a morning. That's how you make an entrance, bro. Everyone, learn how to make first impressions count, guys. All right. So she basically came to compliment me or whatever, that I'm cute or something. And she said she likes my lips or something like this, right? Cool. And I was like, yeah, Kieran has been making fun of me on my lips for years. He always used to say I have big lips and all this rubbish in your face, Kieran. All right.
Definitely didn't say that. Did you see? I think Jay-Z turned out all right. So who am I to say anything
about
me
Neo and all this rubbish? Yeah, now you remember. Oh, suddenly you remember.
Who's your favorite artist? Is it not Neo?
It's not the point. Good musician. Yeah. So, can't apparently I don't know who my favorite artist is actually. I've got a few. But anyway, so then another girl comes in. So she stands by the door or something, and then she's signing stuff. And so then the teacher dude is like, oh, he was, she says you're attractive, whatever. And I'm like, whoa, hey, whatever. But I don't know how to communicate to any of them anyway, you know? So I'm just like, hey, you know, or no, or whatever, you know? So I was like, oh, okay. Well, this is odd. But I guess in some weird way, how can I put it? Yeah, I guess it boosts your self-esteem or your self-confidence kind of thing, you know? At a time when it's been battered over the past few years, you know? In terms of, oh, okay, even though, you know, I'm now partially sighted or whatever. Oh, all right, cool. That's dope. Shout out, ladies. I respect you and your taste in men. Right.
Can I just say, even though your self confidence had been eroded over the years, it was so
Yeah.
high to begin with. The sheer arrogance was so high to begin with. It was probably still higher than the average person, even after all the trauma that had come over these last few years.
Yeah, bro, no arrogance here, bro. I mean, come on. I don't even know
Just
what you're
facts.
referring to. Big facts, bro. All right, no, but no. So anyway, I ended up. So this other dude who I'd met the week before shows me around. Hey, dude, let me show you around. You know, introduced him to some people. So he introduces me to people who are in the Braille class and all that stuff, you know. And yeah, so I end up realizing there's some people here who are totally blind. There's some people who are also partially sighted, but maybe like in terms of reading a phone or something that's typed, because I can see something that's typed better than something that's handwritten. And particularly if it's bold, you know, like if you use like Arial or you bold stuff, sticks out, you know, back to the whole contrast thing, black writing, white paper, blah, blah, blah. You know, it's going to stick out more than just handwriting, you know. Pen leaves very, very thin lines in terms of the actual handwriting stuff. So, yeah, you know, so there's some people who see worse than me here. But then there's some others who are also partially sighted, but they see better than me, you know. But some, it varies. Some in the darkness, they see a bit better. In the light, they see worse, or vice versa, or, you know, but some, like with me, the whole, back to the whole distance thing, I'll generally, reading my phone, I read it maybe best from about this kind of distance. So to an unassuming person, I just look like I can see. Whereas a lot of partially sighted people I've noticed generally hold their phones like this close to their face when they read. Because for them, the closer something is, the better they see it. The vast majority.
And tell me, what did this? So one of the things you've mentioned is a feeling of isolation through this whole period, right? What does it do for you, going to the Blind Society and just seeing not just one or two people, but the sheer variation and magnitude to which you know there are people with visual impairments?
Yeah.
You know, do you? Is it a sense of relief? Is it a sense of community? Is it a sense of I'm not alone? What's the feeling?
The feeling of mingling or interacting with other visually impaired people is probably the best thing that ever happened to me. Not even probably, it is the best thing that happened to me ever since finding out about my diagnosis. Because one, like I mentioned, the dude who invited me to blind cricket, but also as a result, through the society, the braille teacher who was a former UKZN student. I was like, I recall her, when I was doing Braille classes and stuff, and I'm always competitive, I was competing in the class, And she was, and I remember the one day she called me aside and she said to me, "Dude, what are you doing here?" And I'm like,
I'm
"I'm
learning Braille.
attending Braille class." And she's like, "Yeah, but you shouldn't be here. You should be like at university completing a degree or something. You're too smart to just not be to not go back and complete your degree." Because I remember you said you were studying when you lost your eyesight. I'm like, "Yeah, but did you hear the part where I lost my eyesight?" And she's like,
you're not very good at this, are you, Braille teacher?
"Yeah, Braille teacher slow." So, so then she's like, "Hey, you idiot, man. Listen here. I was also studying because she's also visually impaired,
Okay.
So she was also partially. And she's like, "Hey, I was also studying at UKZN #1. So there's no such nonsense. And there's others there's totally blind people who've studied at universities and have completed degrees and stuff and have qualifications." And I'm like, "Oh."
Was that truly the first time you ever contemplated or thought it was possible that you could go back?
Yep, that day.
Okay. So sorry,
That
and what was she saying?
So essentially, she was just telling me that it's like there's no ways that you should not be going back to university. Like you're too smart to not be doing that and whatever. Like I see how you are even here in the class and whatnot. You grasp everything quickly and stuff. Like you literally were learning stuff that some students take a week to learn on the first day you were in this class. So, because I just kept asking more stuff. Like, "Oh, what about this?" And then I just thought ahead of some stuff. Like, "Oh, okay." So
You just had to
basically,
mention
if
how
I'm combining,
all the sorry, you just had to mention how all the women found you attractive, and now how your teacher's saying you're just smarter than everyone else here.
humble brags, bro. Humble brags.
Sorry, how rude of me. I interrupted you to insult you, but anyway, carry on.
Yeah, well, you've always done that, so nothing new.
It's my speciality.
Yeah, exactly. It is. You go out of your way for it. So,
You're right, I do. I set up this whole interview just so I could insult you, but I mean,
wow, that's elaborate. So, yeah, that's basically what it was. It was that conversation that really planted the seed and made me think, well, even though I don't really know how, she didn't necessarily explain that part to me, and yeah, I think we got interrupted anyway or something, but I'm like, all right. But the one thing she did mention, which was important, was she said there's a disability unit at every campus, I'm like, okay, they're the people that are in charge, they know how to deal with disabled students and, they'll assist you basically. So I was like, really? There's a disability unit? I was there. I've never heard of this disability unit. I'm like, okay. I didn't know UKZN had a disability unit. And every campus has one. That's wild. Okay, cool. So she's like, yeah, but you need to apply soon or whatever, applications close in whatever month or whatever. And I was like, okay, cool. So it just so happened that by that time I just started attending blind cricket practices. And one of the guys I met there at blind cricket, he's a totally blind guy. Been totally blind from birth. And he has a music and an IT degree. And the guy was doing IT for work. And it blew my mind.
I can imagine.
I'm like, wait, you do IT? He's like, yeah. How? Ah, it's easy, that thing, my man. Easy. Easy how? Like, that doesn't make sense. And he goes, oh, I studied it at Fitz or whatever. I'm like, hmm? You studied at Fitz? You did IT? And bro, like, it was crazy. Like, honestly, that guy, he inspired me so much. I was like, yo.
Did
I was like, from there, I was like, then I don't have an excuse, you know.
a question on that? Did you ever, looking back, did you ever think at some points your conceptions were very ableist?
Very, yeah, and that's kind of the thing. But I also realized through being at the society just how different the world of being visually impaired is to the general world that the majority of people know.
Mm.
It's so different, bro. Like, there's so many things which basically don't exist in this world but exist in the other. There's so many people you overlooked. You know, if you think about the number of times you've maybe seen someone bump into someone else or trip over something or bump into something or whatever,
Mm.
or even some people who might be driving terribly or whatever, and you're just thinking, what the hell, this person is drunk? Oh, Lord, look at it. What are they doing? That person could actually be partially sighted and you don't even realize. And maybe they don't even realize it yet.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's just so many things that, I just have so much more of a view of those kinds of things, and if I think about like the school like you and I went to and how there was all this, honestly, there was opportunity at those kind of schools and stuff. Yeah, you're exposed to so many different things. You see how big companies or sponsors or whatever work, or big schools that have a whole lot of resources and support and all the things that they can do, compared to then contrasting it with the visually impaired world. And I see how much funding and all that kind of support that should actually be there significantly more is lacking, because it's extremely expensive to have the visual aids and stuff that, honestly, someone like, for me to get a visual aid that I would need just to be able to read something that, I used to do for free, basically. I wouldn't have to buy anything for me to read. I literally just use my eyes and read, Now it's like, I need a 16,000 Rand device that can help me read or whatever, handwriting, or that can zoom in and do all the things that I needed to do with the color contrast and all these things. Where am I going to get that 16,000 Rand as well? Where also, the one thing, unfortunately, as much as it gets mentioned that disabled people need to form this whatever percentage of workforce, vast majority of the time, the one thing I've also learned through experience is visually impaired people generally get left out because our devices and stuff. It's expensive to have a visually disabled employee, So there's just all these things. So then where will I get that 16,000 just to be able to read? So then when I'm applying for a job, where am I even going to get that knowledge or that background that, oh, wait, actually, I can do this job because I have this device or I have experience using this device. Without all those things, it all links in. So that's why I say it's like there's just totally different worlds that I basically, places
And
I
it's
never knew.
when you talk about it, and then you add an extra layer of context, which is being South African, and
Mhm.
the plight of people who've still experience the ramifications of apartheid, and it's one of the things. It's things we've marveled at, like how well we've done as a friend group. We were one of the more fortunate ones who grew up in a I guess in a middle class neighborhood. And I mean, even then, like, just having everyone be comfortable is something that we're proud of, which shouldn't be the case. But I mean, if that's just when we look at it from an able-body perspective, right?
Yeah.
Now, you know, and it's still so difficult if you don't have enough money behind you, if you know you're born I guess disadvantaged, it's tough. And then if you add in the complexity of having a disability on top of that,
Yeah.
it's, you know, it sounds like unless you get very lucky or you're born very rich, it's a very, very dark and lonely place, which is
That's the
sad, because I
unfortunate
mean,
part for the majority.
exactly. I mean, if I look at you, you've always been above average when you know, with everything you've tried, you know, and so for you to lose out on those opportunities because you just have no sense of where you're going is tragic, right? And you've luckily managed to get the right social worker who put you in the right, you know, put you in the right place, and through those conversations and actually just your natural charm of having conversations with people, you've, you know, you figured out that, oh God, there's more opportunity for me, which, you know, a more introverted person may not have even realized had they been in the exact same building at the same time as you. That for me is already eye-opening. But then it also puts me in it gives me the perspective of how many above average people, and even if they're not above average people, but people like you who maybe, you know, parents don't have the time to assist them, right, with all of this, or have no idea, or just don't have the luxury of having someone with a car that can take them to an appointment, who are left with pretty much nothing, sitting at home, right? And it's a chance, and that's devastating, because I mean, I could talk about that just in a South African context, completely just able-bodied people, you know, go to just talking about the opportunity to go to university. Now we're adding layers in terms of within our society, you know, people with disabilities have that magnified times 10 times 100. It's very, very sad. So I mean, for you to be where you are and in your position, I think, you know, it's inspiring, but also I think from your perspective, what's crazy is, you know, even with you know, a visual impairment, I think you're very well aware of how privileged you are and how lucky you are to be where you are today, which is I mean, it's a great story, but it's also just it's sad when you think about how many people out there are, you know, are in your position where you were, where they just have no idea what to do next.
No, so true, bro. Because you're right in that I'm extremely fortunate. I never have any issue with mentioning the fact that I'm so fortunate. One, because, as you say, at least, you know, my parents were both working growing up and all of that, so we were able to live, you know, in a middle class setting and neighborhood, and there were some people who were passionate about education and stuff, so they put me in decent schools as well. Also grew up in a multiracial group of friends from young, you know, so learning how to interact with different people from different backgrounds, meeting their families, seeing what they like in their natural home settings, and all those things, all small little things which I guess you only realize later, you know, when you're immature enough maybe to understand and appreciate all those things. But as well, from the moment that my family knew, and you know, all you guys is my closest group of friends, from the moment all my family and closest friends all knew about my visual impairment, all I ever received was love and support. You know, which is probably the biggest factor in everything that can either build you up and keep you going and keep trying to find new ways to do something or challenge yourself in a positive way, or just completely demoralizes you. And you know, if you don't get it. And there's so many like I like to, you know, I like talking to people. So yeah, like so many people in the visually impaired people that I've met that I love to find out their stories on how did they lose their sight. Okay, could you see before, or was it from birth? Okay, where? And so many where it's like they grew up in a rural area, so no one knew what you do with someone who's blind or partially sighted. So they just sat around until someone just happened to hear or find out, oh, there's actually a boarding school in Pietermaritzburg or in Newcastle that's, you know, before that's for the blind or whatever. And then they just get sent to that boarding school, maybe, but now they're starting school at the age of 9, 10, you know, that kind of stuff, you know. So yeah, it's honestly, it's extremely sad. Because, yeah, some people end up getting delayed in the proper development in everything that they need to learn and know and understand. And there's a lot of stuff that people who can see stuff will relate to, you know, just simple stuff like stuff that's trending on Twitter and stuff. Oh, did you see that video that's trending on Twitter? The blind person's not going to know that. Most of the, you know, unless they just happen to hear the video. But if it's something visual, then it's different, you know, like all those small little things which you take for granted. That's why I say, like, the world of disabled to non-disabled is actually so different, and it's in I can notice it because I've actually been on both sides of the line, you know. And yeah, for many people it's not like that though. Yeah.
And what's the best way to almost bridge that gap?
For me, one of the best ways I know how, it's part of the reason why I'm so passionate about blind cricket. Sport is just something that generally brings people together, you know. It doesn't necessarily need lengthy conversations or, you know, overly in-depth things sometimes. But by simple virtue of you saying, yeah, I play for the KZN provincial team, I play blind cricket, you know, even sometimes I'll say blind cricket, I'll notice some people say, hey, he plays cricket. They won't say blind because they're sort of scared to say they were blind, but it's okay. It's a start though. They're still enthused or amazed by it. Like, but how? How do you guys play? And then I'll explain, or I'm like, you know, come watch on Saturday or do, like, we're doing this, or, and then when people actually do come around, they'll always just stand and show, you know, or there's some tournaments we've had where just people in the neighborhood, or, oh yeah, we work in this office park. Yeah, we were watching, we were wondering what's going on here, you know. Then you explain to them, and they're like, wait, so everyone on the field has a disability, like they all can't see? Like, yeah, every single one. But they're like, but that guy's running and chasing the ball. He's throwing it straight towards the keeper. That one's hitting it like this. And I'm like, yeah, that's because the keeper's communicating or whatever. You know, there's all these nuances of communication, sound, what, you know, that come in. It's practice. They don't just do this. Like, it takes a lot and lots of skill and hard work to get to the level they're at and all these things. And then some of them will try to get sponsorships and, or can you maybe come through to this kind of event and what. So people are learning through the sport because it's a lot easier a way for them to get in contact. Then they start talking to the guys. They're like, these guys are so funny, you know, like when they hear all the nonsense jokes and some of the guys each other about being blind or not seeing. What do you know? You couldn't even see that. They were like, oh, well, you too, or whatever, you know.
Do you know who else said sport is an effective tool to bridge the gap between our differences?
I suspect you're gonna say Nelson Mandela.
Nelson Mandela. Another humble brag on your part.
I have fought for blind cricket.
You're silly. Join us next week for part 2 with Ndumiso.